So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you and the big crowd here. I hope you see us in the back as well, to the session taking OER from commitment to action. So, my name is Pawlowski, and maybe we just take a minute to introduce our panel speakers. Ebba, would you like to introduce yourself just briefly before I start with the introduction?
I am Ebba Ossiannilsson, coming from Swedish Association for Distance Education. I'm based in Sweden, but I also work for the International Council for Open and Distance Education. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Markus Bick. I'm a teacher and professor in information systems here in Berlin, so my travel was not that far. I'm working for a transnational business school with 6 campuses around in Europe, and I think that makes it pretty obvious that online learning, online educational resources are kind of important here as well.
Okay, my name is Knut Inge Skifjeld, and I come from Norway. I work for an organization called NDLA, National Digital Learning Arena, and we provide open educational resources for upper secondary students. We have about 30,000 articles online, which are completely open and Creative Commons licensed. And we have about 60,000 daily users. So we track everything with analytics and everything and have a very good process going. And we also use a lot of teachers from Norwegian schools to produce content for us. So we'll talk more about that later.
My name is Cecilie Eftedal, and I work with Knut Inge at NDLA, and he basically said everything, so I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I think the session is quite important at the moment. As you might know, the UNESCO just launched their recommendations on open educational resources recently. It's in the review process, and we'll have the publication, I think, in the beginning of 2019. Ebba will report a little bit more on that. So let me introduce just briefly what we are talking about. So I guess you're all familiar. Who of you is actually teaching? Okay. Who has used open educational resources already? Okay, so I don't have to tell you anymore what it's all about. Well, my understanding anyway is just any kind of learning material or any resource you can use for learning and teaching purposes using a free or an open license. So Creative Commons is actually the way to go. That's the license. But we also have a lot of other possible resources. For example, when we share experiences, we talk about open educational practices. So sharing learning scenarios is also a way, and I understand that as well as an open educational resource in the broad sense. But also when we talk about systems which are used, for example, Moodle or H5P as open source systems, I would also understand them as open educational resources. So, well, I think we all share the idea that it's a great idea to share resources, to work together, to collaborate. But for some reason, the reuse works quite well. However, really collaborating purposefully on open educational resources does not really yet work. So it does not really take off so far. So today, one of the ideas is actually to take these great ideas where we are committed, where we think, oh yeah, let's do that, to real action. So how can we actually get open educational resources into the mainstream so that maybe next time the auditorium is filled to the last place? So as a start, I would like to report a little bit on a quite challenging project we have run in Germany. It was about open educational resources for the hardest target group you could ever imagine, for the public sector. Only professors are worse, so being one, I can definitely tell you. So what we did, we had a project which was called Public Knowledge Resources, where we worked with different communities, with different cities, and also authorities on a national level in Germany. And I would like to share what we did there. The first step actually was we tried to understand how open are public authorities for open educational resources. And we basically found that there were a lot of insecurities. People, of course, did not know Creative Commons or any open license. They were not sure about the internal administrative processes. What could they actually publish open as a public employee? And there we also saw, especially between different authorities, there is almost no knowledge management at all. So, however, after an initial stage of awareness building, we saw that more or less 3 aspects were extremely important. So people just wanted to know, okay, how are we going to train our employees? What do they need to know? And for us, the first step was to develop a competence framework for open educational resources. And based on that, we developed workshops and trainings on different levels. So, for example, we looked at the strategy building process, so strategies and decisions from the management were extremely important. We also trained just normal people in the usage and development of open educational resources. And of course, we tried to facilitate this process in terms of change management. Well, if you're interested, we can, of course, as we have published everything open, the competence framework with you. But I would like now to share our main lessons so that we take it over and see what can we learn from such a project and how can we take this, well, to a kind of action plan for the next steps. So our key challenges we had, and it's not only valid for the public sector, we had a very bad understanding of open licenses. So there was some general understanding, but in detail, when you combine resources, for example, people just didn't know how to act and what to do. The strategic support was not there. So people, of course, were familiar on a strategic level, for example, with e-government initiatives, maybe in some cases with open data initiatives, but never with open learning materials. And last but not least, people were just not sure how to act, how to cooperate, how to collaborate. They were just not sure, okay, can I talk to and give stuff to the guy in the next city or in another authority? So these were our key challenges, and my other challenges are gone for some reason. Wait a moment, I'll just skip a little bit to find, there we are. So the main fields of application to motivate the public authorities, especially the first one, preserving knowledge, because a lot of people retire in the next months and years. This was our really top application field. So when we said, okay, we have a method to, well, preserve the knowledge of the older staff members, then the authorities were very, very open. They were also quite interested in collaborating across the sectors, across different authorities and across city borders, for example. So in the beginning there was some resistance, they didn't know how to do it, but afterwards they were quite interested in this field. And then we saw we need to connect topics, and we need to understand how do open educational resources, for example, connect to open data. So that was like a key field for the people in the public administration. So coming to the success factors, so we needed continuous exchange, so it has to become a kind of work routine. So when the, let's say, when the boss of a public authority says, okay, let's make or let's use an open license for all the documents we use for knowledge exchange, then it becomes a routine quite quickly. The strategy support, so the management has to agree, they have to give some kind of work instructions regarding open educational resources, and when they say it's okay, all the employees follow as well. And last but not least, of course, we need some kind of motivating users, so people who show what can they actually do and what can we actually achieve with open educational resources. So I think we have learned quite a lot from this project, and bringing OER into action mainly needs these 3 steps: strategy support, making it a work routine, and getting the kind of top users for open educational resources in an organization. So this is our experience I wanted to share, and now I would like to introduce Ebba, who will report from the Swedish experiences. I'll just skip back.
So thank you very much, Jan, and thank you very much for the invitation to being here. Actually, I will not report about the Swedish experiences that much, but more about the international experiences. As I'm mainly working, I'm the vice president for the Swedish Association for Distance Education, but I work mainly at the international level nowadays with the large organizations who are dealing with opening up education. I work for the ICD, and I am leading and chairing the OER Advocacy Committee together with ICD and together with UNESCO. And we are some 10 people in the Advocacy Committee working mainly with the policy and strategic issues, and of course with the recommendations with Jan was mentioning previously. I'm also in Eden, the European Distance and E-Learning Network, where I'm in the EC, but I'm also chairing and leading the special interest group about technology-enhanced learning and OER and openness. And I also work with Open Education Europa as an ambassador and a fellow. Where do you have the changing?
Yeah,
Where do I change?
Oh, sorry. Here it is.
Thank you. So I will take up some issues. First, about what we're doing about our advocacy committee with ICD, and also about UN UNESCO OER recommendations, which are just out now for the governments around in the world. And I will also report something about, there was a very important conference in the beginning of the week in Paris, organized by ICD, Open Education Consortium, and the French Minister of Education. And it was about our OEC Leadership Summit, because the leaders have really an important role when it comes to opening up education, and not least the work with OER. So this ICD OER Advocacy Committee was launched last year together with the World Conference with the ICDE. And as I said, we are some 10 advocates working in the committee. And it is mainly about policy and strategic issues to be used for UNESCO, for example, and for other kind of authorities. And we also work very much a close collaboration with the ICD and UNESCO OER chairs. And for the moment, there are 8 of them around the globe. So we're working on providing policy support and uptake and the use and reuse of OER. And actually, ICD has been working with OER since its very start in 2002. The UNESCO recommendations, which are just now out, they can be summarized. I suppose that many of you have seen the draft for that, and maybe you also have responded to your own country. I have done it for Sweden at least. But the recommendations can be addressed and summarized in 5 objectives. First, about it is not, of course, the recommendations are built on all the important earlier paper and all the conferences which have been previously. And it's not just about OER, but it is very much about open education culture and practices and how to deal with that. So the first one is about building the capacity of stakeholders to create, access, use, adapt, and redistribute OER. And second, developing support policies. Third, encourage inclusive and equitable quality OER. Fourth, nurturing the creation of sustainability models for OER. And last, facilitating international cooperation. So you see those objectives are not so much about the resources as such, as it is about the infrastructure and how to implement, because there are needs to go from, that is also the topic of our session here, from commitment, from awareness raising to actions. And all those 5 objectives address action initiatives. From the previous conference in Paris, we were working on opening up education very much, and one topic was about, of course, about OER. And there we talked about, we worked very practically on roadmaps, and those roadmaps will be communicating by the host organizations, and also again how we can move from awareness raising to actions. And there were 4 principles. It was about assets, people and community, operations and sustainability, and last, benefits and value propositions about OERs. Sorry. I think the images are mixed a bit because I had some more. They are somewhat mixed, the images. I had at least 2 more. Okay, I will not take time to do this, but I will say why does it matter? First of all, it matters because we have the Sustainable Development Goals, not at least number 4, which is about education. But and that was so important, so we got a special SDG just for education. But on the other hand, opening up education relate to at least 5 of the other SDGs. And I would say maybe all of the 16 others, but very much related to 5 of them, and not at least the one about social rights. So that is why it matters, and why we need to go from commitment to actions. And second, we have the 10th anniversary of the Cape Town Declaration, which are summarized in 10 points. And that is about openness as such, open communication, open pedagogy. It is about working with other initiatives related to openness. But also about the resources as such, and how we can, about recognition, and about, of course, licensing is very important. But again, the recommendations in the Cape Town 10 years after is very much, again, about how to move from awareness raising to actions. So I will end with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ebba. So now I would... do you use your own slides, or do you use this?
I have a separate.
Okay, perfect.
Right. We'll just
Please go ahead.
standing together here.
Guten Tag, Berlin. Wir sind sehr froh, hier zu sein. This is NDLA. It is a site created from teachers all over Norway. We have more than 50 subjects for upper secondary school and more than 100,000 resources. It's Creative Commons license, which means there are no subscription, it's free for everyone, nothing to pay, so virtually for everybody. Very recently, we have changed our design. So this is the 2018 edition of our design, and this is just to show you an example of one of our articles, one of our 30,000 or even more articles. That was a little bit fast. Let's go back to the other 2018 edition. That's actually the co-workers of NDLA, about 50 in total, I think.
Right, and just like you saw on the last slide here, you see that you have about 50 people in there, and about 30 or something of those are teachers who are contracted to work for NDLA to produce content. That means that now we've been in business for 11 years, so actually the commitment to action bit is a bit late for us because we've been in the action bit for 11 years. Sorry about that, but okay, the point is that over the years we've had hundreds of teachers working for us at NDLA. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we get the fresh experience from the classroom into our production organization. And then they can produce content that they know pretty well will be sought after out there in the schools. And also, we cooperate with a lot of organizations and design companies and, you know, technological companies like Bouvet, Knowit, NetLife. You may have heard of some of these companies, Keytech. So NDLA also supports the EdTech industry in Norway. It actually started in 2007, or at least the basis for our existence started then when the Norwegian Parliament decided that education for upper secondary students should be free. So you can't charge money for a book, you're going to get a book, and then NDLA enters the scene and says that, okay, we can do this a lot more media rich, a lot more interactive, a lot more up-to-date, etc. And we got the counties along. There are 19 counties cooperating all over Norway about this NDLA project. And a very important takeaway here is that up until then, we had financed a lot of projects around here and around there. The National Digital Learning Arena was one gathered national sort of initiative. And it's very important that you don't spread the money out on a lot of projects that basically creates chaos in the world of OER, in my opinion. It's a lot better to stick with one solution for the whole country, and then you can build a really good solution. Let's move on here. When we started up, a lot of digital resources was viewed as a sort of fun accessoire in education. Okay, you can do it on Friday to create some variation. But of course today, we all understand that digital solutions are the best all the way because of their richness, their ability to be updated, etc. So, and at the time when we started up, there was also a lot of enthusiasm about the wikis. WordPress was around, Moodle, you know, we had all this enthusiasm. And we felt that this was a very important time in history when moving into a new digital age and everything. And we could empower teachers to create their own resources, all this wonderful thing of OER. In Norway, we have two words I thought I was going to teach you, dugnad or fellesbeite. Fellesbeite was where the farmers let their cows graze, and that was sort of one big area where everyone could go with their cows and they could graze. And dugnad is, you know, what we do on our spare time with no pay at all, like support some local activity. But I suspect that a few of you already know those words when I look here at the audience. I see some of my friends around here. Okay. So NDLA creates digital subject collections, more than 30,000 articles, 50 subjects. We have an editorial model where we contract teachers to create for us. We also cooperate with digital archives, museums, and other organizations, and that's a very interesting model as well. We made the history subject doing that kind of networking. And I think one of the wonderful things about that type of organization that NDLA is this sort of symbiosis. We have hundreds of teachers coming into NDLA. Their digital competence skyrockets in a few years because they become very digital competent using the authoring tools and everything. And then they go back to school, hopefully using our resources, and that sort of creates a sort of ownership between teachers and NDLA. And we'd like to see NDLA as sort of an experience exchange layer, which you talked about as well, the importance of having that layer. So the symbiosis is very important. Traditional textbook authoring, I've written 4 textbooks, and in all of those processes, it was very sort of, you handed in a manuscript and got something back a year later, or half a year later when it was printed and distributed, and well, there was not really a lot of a dynamic process, and you couldn't do anything about it when you found the mistakes. We can do that. Okay, I think we have sustainability covered. We have a lot of student interviews, testing and observation as well. Cecilie is going to talk about that later. And as I mentioned, we have 60,000 daily users, so we have quite a significant number to work with there. We support the edtech industry. We were a major funder of H5P, which I guess some of you have heard of. H5P is installed in 30,000 websites all over the world, creating interactive media-rich content. We also do a cooperation with the University of Oslo, Talkwall. I would very much recommend that site, talkwall.no. It's, of course, open. It's based on dialogic pedagogy, and it's so right for our time, where we want to sort of engage the students in learning, not just stand up and talk to them about knowledge, but involve them in learning. So check out Talkwall, talkwall.no. It's also in cooperation with Cambridge. Yeah, and we have a cooperation with Kahoot, which you might have heard of. It's a bit of a fun part. Yeah.
Okay, so we've been in business for about 11 years now, and I'm very proud to say that last year, in 2016, we actually got an award for the best OER site for open education. So that was quite good for us, I think. And we are a big site, and we do have a lot of users. And some of the key results so far are actually that 98% of all Norwegian teachers know about us. Over 60% of Norwegian teachers actually use us in their teaching. More than 50% use NDLA often. We have high scores for value and quality, and we have a high level of both private and public cooperation. And also 70% of the budgets are spent in the open market, and this is from a recent survey in 2017.
And this is us, back in Skien in Norway. No.
It's actually here.
It's here, yes.
It is.
We don't have that in Norway.
No.
Okay. And that's how you spell our names. Yeah. We're not going to say much about that.
No, let's move on.
Yeah. I think we have been so lucky to live in an age where we have gone from one age into another age. If you talk about the Gutenberg, paper copy, paper, we go into a world of digitalization, community, networking, processing, all that. So why should we continue sort of producing books, transport them, print them, throw them away after four years, and then make some new chop downs on woods? It doesn't make sense. We need processes, and we're moving from a period of you have an idea, you make a plan, and then you produce it, to processes. So all the articles that we produce, they are not products, they are processes. And they will change as we analyze how they are used, as we get feedback. And that's sort of the wonderful thing about building communities, using standards so that your content can flow from one continent to another continent. All our H5P content can be used just as well in Australia, where we, by the way, we've been part of a big conference now. So H5P floats in Australia, it floats in America, everywhere. And our Creative Commons is also a sort of a global license. So we need to sort of get the flow. We need to get away from that time when we produced brilliant solutions on our own little island. And we need to stick up to the standards, as also you, Jan, mentioned, that it's very important that we cooperate and follow the same standards. So that's the fun thing is, of course, that the more our resources are used, the higher the value is of each and one of them, because we get more information on how to fine-tune them. So it's not like you wear something down when you use an OER resource, it's like you add usage, or you add value to it, because we know more about how the usability of the resource and everything. So I guess we can move on there.
You can actually.
I can move on here. And of course, it's very important also in this aspect here with the Sustainable Development Goals that UNESCO has. Goal 4, the right to education is universal. High-quality learning resources should be easy to create, distribute, etc. Education is a key to reducing poverty. So in that sense also, if we can create production systems that can flow all globally and be used by everyone, we can rather spend time and resources all over the world to create the content. It's not a good idea to keep producing new systems. Use one. I'm going to suggest one as well. But before that, I'm also going to share this site with you, the Global Digital Library. It's been spearheaded by NDLA. Christer Gunnarsson, some of you may have heard that name. He's been working a lot with this one, and this is to beat illiteracy. So on this site, you can find stories for kids on lesser used languages. So that's also a part of this UNESCO drive, you know, to that education is not a cost, it's an investment. Okay, so it's all about, we're living here in a world where we need to change our mindset. If you use WordPress, Moodle, or Drupal, and you add an H5P installation, H5P is a toolbox for a lot of content types, then you can be in business tomorrow, and you can have a site up there which can be used and reused all over the world. So there's really no excuse not to just start up and go into action. Sadly, we have millions of OER resources out there. We have a big battery, but the OER light is very dim. And it's my understanding that it is dim because OER resources are hard to find often. They have different technical solutions. They are not cross-platform compatible. H5P is. So if you use the standards, if you use Creative Commons, the world is at your fingertips. The world becomes very small. You can reach it tomorrow through your website if you use open standards. Or we can do like we did in the old days, invent gallon, liter, quarter, pint, spoon. Well, you know what I'm talking about. We have to work together if we want things to float. So don't float your boat in a pond, go for the ocean. That was a slogan I came up with there. And H5P is in a way a sort of stairway to H5P. Because when we started up back in 2007 and 8, we used Flash a lot. Flash was costly. It was non-editable unless you were a specialist. It was non-iterative, and it was non-compatible with iPad. So we boxed ourselves in. These are bathtubs. We're coming from a time of bathtubs. We have copyright and special technological solutions. And we're moving into a time of open standards and open solutions, just like the web itself is, you know, with the HTML protocol. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So this is all the content types you have in H5P. And these are some of our content types, just to show you the list. So just move on quickly here. I strongly suggest that you take a look at H5P if you are not already familiar with it, and that you look at creativecommons.org, because that is actually the legal foundation. That is why we can do all this. We can't do this with copyrighted material. We need to have a Creative Commons and open license for it. Okay, and so we can do a lot of testing.
Yeah, because I mean, having the content is one thing, but you have to garden it, you have to prune it. And how do you do that? Well, we do it with the help of our students. So what we have actually created is a student or a student user panel with students from upper secondary schools all over Norway. And the idea started in 2015, I think, when we thought that now is the time to renew NDLA. We need to do something new, how to do it. So the idea was to ask teachers and students all over Norway if they could participate, if they could show and tell us how could we help these students to learn best. Needless to say, I mean, we were teachers. I was a language teacher, the other ones taught math and other subjects. How on earth were we supposed to do that? I mean, we didn't even know how to create the panels and how to do the things. So we were lucky enough to find some UX experts. We actually have a lot of them in Norway. So we found these people, and I mean, they had to help us with everything, like the test scripts, the tasks. We didn't know exactly how to write them. Performing the tests, that was a task that we needed help for, and even analyzing the findings as well. So the thing was that we applied, or we actually wanted teachers and students to apply for being part of this panel. And I must admit, we were tremendously nervous, because, I mean, what if they didn't even care to be part of the panel? And if they cared about being part of the panel, would they bother to give us useful feedback? Or not at all. But luckily for us, I mean, a lot of people wanted, or a lot of students and teachers wanted to participate. So we had the panels. We were going out into the schools to do the testing. I was the first one to do the testing. I spent a whole week in September 2015, and I don't think I slept one bit the day before the first test day. I was only observing and taking notes, but still, I mean, for me, user testing was so overwhelming. But after that week, I found out it was so much fun too, which is good. So we created this hairy goal for ourselves that within the next 3 years, we were actually going to do this ourselves, more or less all the work. And I don't even think we believed that we could do it. I mean, what if we didn't ask the right questions? Or what if we didn't, you know, pick up on the necessary and the important findings? And what if we didn't know how to analyze the findings so that we could actually take it and make the resources better? But little by little, we pushed ourselves into doing more and more of the work. And today, I would say that we have moved from, let's say, 90% expert and 10% us to 90% us and 10% expert. So we do more or less all the work on our own. We're not saying that we're as good as the expert, but we have created a system and a culture for testing. So we're now doing it basically on our own. But to add extra information, it's important for us as well also to be in the classrooms. And we observe the students a lot. We observe how teachers teach, and we observe how students actually work and learn. And from those observations and interviews, we take back what we can and we add it to the other information that we have from the user tests already. A third, or actually fourth, source of information is user tracking. And we have now created a system where we can track the user's movement online. So we can find out what does the user see? How long does he look at a page? What kind of content does he view? And so on. And even more exciting, we can compare one subject to another and content types and see if one is, for example, used a lot in Norwegian, but not so much in English, and try and, you know, work out why is that. So having a lot of users giving us all kinds of feedback and using objective methods, that gives us a chance, we think, and a possibility to improve our content. Okay, Knut Inge talked about wearing things out. Like clothes, I would say, is very opposite from our resources, because our resources, we think, get better and better the more they're used. Clothes get worn out, basically. So we revise and remix, reuse, redistribute, and retain our resources to keep them as sustainable as possible. And we do this with the help of our users, who, Knut Inge said, are not only our users, but they are contributors as well. And how do we make this happen? Well, the fact that 99% of our content is Creative Commons licensed.
Yeah. So to sum it up, please use us. Our content is reusable, remixable. The platform we use is also open source. So if you want to have a look at our production systems and maybe use some of the same, you can do that. So NDLA is open source from the bottom to the top, and we want to be used. We want to be part of communities. We want others to build together in a network community. So check it out on ndla.no, and good luck with community building.
So, thank you very much. We have one last input from Markus Bick. So, you got everything?
Yes, thank you, Jan. Hello. Yes, I'm very, very grateful to be part of this panel because at some point I even maybe see myself still as a rookie in open educational resources, maybe even though I'm one of the persons with the most gray hair on the panel here. But on the other hand, yes, maybe I can say I already created with Jan together already 11 years ago an open educational resource on global knowledge management when we developed the course together for his Finnish environment at that time and my German environment here. And so being curious about open educational resources because I see a lot of benefits here. I've been in this topic and I even try to inspire always my colleagues in my institution. And I just want to tell you 2 sentences here that because maybe the focus I can provide is also the niche from a private business school, because at some point, you know, students come to us to pay for education, for their teaching and learning experiences. And so sometimes it might be a little bit of a trick maybe to use open educational resources, which might confuse our bodies in the institution, like a teaching and learning committee or other board members and the students in itself. So this is really a big issue where we always are in, and maybe I'm also happy to answer during the following of the presentation. But because majorly, looking at the slide, we have really 6 nice campuses across Europe. We are teaching students almost in the same courses across the different campuses, so using also standardized, hopefully open educational resources would always be a benefit here. So I do not want to go too much into the slide. It should just show that I tried to align to the process that Jan also was presenting in the very beginning when we looked at the Open Educational Resource Project on public services. And in this point, he was also mentioning that, of course, the toughest user group is not only public service, but also professors, and which is something I try to fight with across different countries and different educational systems. So in my presentation, I want to focus on one of our recent projects, which is the Reopen project. It is, yes, it actually finished just a couple of weeks ago, and it is about, as the title of the presentation already shows, about the validation of open educational resources. And so one of the main objectives, I'm not sure if you can read it, was also maybe to empower teachers and trainers in CPD environments for developing their own open online learning environments and providing teaching materials, and maybe also considering how to create recognition in regards to maybe badges and so on and so forth. And that is what we did here. So yes, this is the theme of the project, so we were a very international environment, and even Eden was part of it. So Ebba already mentioned that this is an integrational part here. And so we started in November 2016 with the objective to really validate non-formal open learning environments. So you see that this is, of course, already kind of a split for private business school, how to integrate maybe non-formal things in our formal environments. And that is maybe really something which is very important. But on the other hand, of course, we are also very engaged in executive education. And in regards to that, of course, we see and understand that there are formal and informal ways of teaching and learning. So maybe to directly jump into the results part, because luckily the project is already over, so I can maybe present some insights. And maybe even though we are being taped, maybe we can provide maybe some insights which are not officially provided. I'm very willing to share here, because the main idea is to bring OER into action. And of course, sometimes we really need to be very open and frank where we are and where are the pain points to develop. So yes, the training material was developed, and we actually also validated these training materials in the project. So every partner brought in some teachers and trainers, internally, externally, so it could be professors from ECP in our case, or even some external teachers, as we call it in our French Grand École, the vacataires. And so they were really asked to develop an open online environment thing and applying these teaching and learning materials. So this is really something which maybe could be kind of part for bringing all these things into action here. And yes, so I would really also invite you to visit our platform, the Reopen EU platform, where you can all find the intellectual outputs and results. So this is maybe really, for those of you who are interested, something that could be really much of a help. So each of the partner was actually also meant to develop one of the courses. And you can see we have had different projects here. One was more on language classes. The other one was maybe on project management. Another one was more on traditional networks capabilities. And then the one we were in charge of is the digital skills part, because even though it was done by an external guy I'm working with together quite for a long time, we are also interested in the development of digital competencies, and we thought this could be really a benefit also to provide and use this environment already to develop an open online course for that. So these courses were piloted, and then at some point I need to be very open and frank. Now they are open courses, but at some point we learned during the process we did not use too much of open content in our courses. Shame on us, okay? But it was maybe during the process that everybody, and that's maybe also one of the issues here for open education resource, everybody more or less trusted his maybe own environment. I think maybe I could say for us, digital skills, digital competencies, it's a super new topic, so there is not too much open educational resources available, which is true, but we maybe could have done even better by ourselves. But we also wanted to see how somebody external, who is a teacher and trainer, can use these environments really to build an open educational environment, and what these might be struggling or not. And actually that is also what the other partners also experienced, because I guess the introduction to wireless network design, I think there should be a plethora of open educational resources, at least in some parts. But it was also more or less usually developed by themselves, and even at the piloting phase, all the content was unfortunately not too very open. So what we can see already here at some point in regard to the commitment, yes, but action, maybe one big issue is also the trust part. And it's maybe not only about the Creative Commons perspective, but also maybe whom I'm going to trust and who's my audience, because that's sometimes not super obvious in an open educational environment. So how would you do it in our course? Actually, we did it in a kind of a hybrid environment. So even though I was praising that it is for non-formal environments, it was also that we wanted to integrate it maybe in a little bit, making it more formal environment. So each of the course described before was actually amounting up to one ECTS. So even you see here we already tried to consider the opportunity of recognition. So even having something that the participants have a key takeaway. So we already put kind of a badge on it, which is not a content badge, but a price badge saying it is worth one ECTS. So making it maybe accountable for your other progression, maybe in another institution where you're studying. So we have done it also in a blended version with presence learning and online version. And it was just the idea maybe that they really have to develop a group project. So this was the online part here. And we also provided some online resources which they can use. And then they also need to have virtual environment, some virtual teamwork. We also released one of the contact hours sessions of 3 hours, even making them work. So we were also, making a benefit for the participants here. And then in the second part, we also have kind of a standard part about digital storytelling and so on and so forth. So this is just maybe to give you a feeling how it worked, and to be very open and frank, that is actually how all the other partners did it in most ways as well for the other 4 courses. So yes, as this is maybe the web page here, you can see, you can enter the course. Actually, everybody is invited who is interested in learning something about digital skills, digital competencies, and how to develop them. And you see that, of course, we did a lot of validation of our courses, and we have an external and internal review. The external review was done by the students. We followed the typical traffic light approach of validating the course, so there was a form developed that we have provided in a questionnaire to the participants, and then also asked the teacher and a little bit of an internal review board, let's call it, some colleagues in that field being active, some IHR colleague developed it, and so we have been very, very successful. To be open, 2 students could not participate in that because they were ill at that time and even off to the Paris campus due to some private issues. So this was a transnational program where the people come from Paris for a certain kind of period, 1 semester to Berlin. So this is, of course, the issues we are sometimes coping with. And so, however, we are very happy that 95% of our participants completed here. So, and maybe, already paving, as I'm at the end of this presentation part of the workshop, I also want to explain some of the maybe, let's say, next steps. So, of course, we need to revise that course. We even want to make it more open, even integrating the digital competence framework developed and provided by the EU, more having now also this more practical-oriented part here. And yes, maybe a second question, maybe that can already open the panel. So maybe not overtaking Jan's part here, but it's, of course, can open online courses foster the progress of the OER part? So how can we really take benefit of OER? That's from my side. Yes, thank you for the attention, and that was it. And now we have your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Markus. Well, now I would like to go into the panel discussion. And of course, the discussion is also open to the audience. So at any time, if you have comments, questions, remarks, please just raise your hand. And I hope there is a microphone for the audience as well. So then we can just go ahead. Well, I would like to start with our experienced colleagues from Norway. I mean, not many countries have as good actions as you have and experiences in NDLA. Well, what would be your suggestion to an organization which would like to take up OER? If they are interested but not maybe even committed, what should we do?
Okay, there are many things you can do. You can point out that digital resources are a lot more dynamic, a lot more media-rich than the traditional textbook model. You can point out that including teachers, contracting teachers into to co-produce content in a production platform creates a very good sort of symbiosis or experience exchange layer, if you like. It's a way of building competencies, both in the organization and when I take it back to the schools. And you can also point out that education is an investment, it is not a cost. And with the UNESCO goals, we should all commit to the idea that education shall be free. And because we have the technology now available with all the open standards and all the sort of publication systems and all the technology is in place, we should also get the governments to understand that we need to build communities We need to exchange experiences and yeah, build together. I think the time is ripe for that now. So I don't know if that was.
Of course, yeah. But how did you overcome some of the obstacles? I mean, I see colleagues at universities who say, well, I don't have the time for it. I see a lot of teachers saying, well, that's an additional effort, so the do not does
it's not
not
in
work.
our model. It's not in our model because we say, okay, we use the school system and we reach out to the schools and say, do you have any teachers who are who like to produce things and would like to write subject material? And then we get feedback and say, oh yeah, we have one here, we can suggest this one, this one, this one. And then they come into editorial staffs with us and they produce, and they are highly motivated. These are some of the best teachers in Norway who come into our organization, produce content, we share it with everyone, and then they go back to the organization and spread the good word, But there's one more important thing, and that is that in Norway we have about 400 or 500 subjects. And there are only there's only a market for a very small number of those, commercially speaking, because there are so few students. You'll have to have several thousand students to make it viable to create a traditional textbook. But the government has a responsibility to create educational resources for everyone. So we have subjects with 10 or 20 users per week. They're a small group, but it's our obligation to create learning resources. So if you're looking about setting up an organization, you don't have to go out there and say, okay, we're going to do one in the subjects that the publishers make the most money from, necessarily. I guess in Germany as well, there are lots of vocational subjects that are not very profitable for a publishing point of view. So go for those, establish an organization, build quality, and then gradually dig into a bigger market. That was a sleazy plan, but I think it could work.
Markus, which barriers did you experience when you worked with colleagues, so also that we could learn from your organization, and how did you overcome the initial resistance, which was probably there?
Yeah, to be very open, I did not overcome all the barriers, so it's still something which is a continuing process. Yes, the specificity is, of course, that, yes, at some point, our school is very traditional. We are going to celebrate our B-century next year. And I'm telling you this because it also maybe shows the understanding how teaching is done. It's more in classroom, even sometimes not neglecting digital resources, but saying, okay, this is more the enabling environment. And so what professors bring in is sometimes, of course, the argument you mentioned, the lack of time, because at some point we are stretching a little bit at the moment, we are on a growth path, and so at some point at least I need to have some time to do it, and so it's either enthusiasm or not. So this is where you need to find the people, and then it's a typical change management when you have kind of a, let's say, yes, critical mass of people that you can convince the others. Maybe luckily now I'm with the school for 13 years, so I also know a lot of people and a little bit about the politics. So at some point I already directly try to engage the academic director of studies, so going directly to the top and not only having this bottom-up grassroots approach. But yeah, it's still very difficult and really needs time to convince people. And the second challenge is, of course, it was one in the objectives from UNESCO, the internationalization, the international experience. Of course, we have 6 educational environments we are integrating. And that also considers maybe 6 different types of teaching, okay? So yes, we are a business school, which is more case-driven oriented. But then, of course, everybody has its specificities, okay? We have the UK guys, which are very putting a hell of teamwork on the students and seeing how they can swim in the cold water. Then we maybe have the French colleagues, which is more still sometimes more ex-cathedral lecture style. And then we have also Germans who are already looking at self-learning, so might be also more willing to provide and use some of these tools. So maybe, but to completely answer to your question is that it is really an ongoing project and really trying to convince people and even making them really feel where they can even benefit from it. Maybe saying, look, there's something somebody else already developed, because actually at some point we already have it in our school. You know, I was overtaking a course, and of course I was looking around who is doing the same course and which resources I can take from him. This is not open, but you know, here you can maybe make the point saying that's what we are doing in our closed environment. Why not going broader?
Well, just one more question, also based on my personal experience, because I think, especially in higher education, there is a lot of lack of recognition. So I mean, we don't get any incentives for producing open educational resources. I mean, in the normal German incentive schemes for professors and for higher education, this is just not a part. Did you invent something like that, or did you just buy personal presents for your colleagues?
Yeah, there was a dean of faculty which was kind of proactive here. She developed kind of, we cannot really say a business model, but you know, some kind of benefit model or loyalties approach. So that was maybe not only for open things, but if somebody developed a course, he can get either a teaching load reduction or the same amount of this teaching load reduction for creating, or some money for his extra money for doing this. And then also the main idea was that when the course is reused at some point from somebody else, also this course to roughly 1/4 or 1/3 could even apply to my teaching load. So if you're using my course, that we can do it. But this was developed, and at the moment it's on political discussion, because that's maybe a nice faculty idea, the dean of faculty, but now the executive board of the school has to decide if it's really worth it and how to do it. Okay. But I think this was really a nice idea.
Ebba, you would like to react to that?
First of all, I think we shall stop talk about barriers, because talking about that takes a lot of energy and time and this kind of issues. I will rather argue for that we need to see all the possibilities and why it matters. And it matters because so many reasons. First of all, education should be free for everyone and available for everyone. And now we have the SDGs goals, who really can help us put things forward. And I think whoever we are, wherever we are, we have to be advocates ourselves, because each of us can make a difference in the way we act, perform, discuss. And that is also why I don't like to discuss about barriers, because if we still keep to do that, we keep the mantra going. Instead of be advocates, all of us, for openness. We have the SDGs, we have the, as I've mentioned myself, the Cape Town declarations. 10 rather easy recommendations to go for. And there again, they are maybe easy, but also rather, you know, large, and they can be evolved in a different kind of ways. But they are easy to remember, and every day we can make a difference if we keep those 10 recommendations in our daily basis and keep that mantra going instead. And also the issue of the ecosystem of OER and about openness. And it's not just so much about, you know, OER as such. It is the infrastructure, as you mentioned yourself, about recognition, about incentives, and that's why leadership is so important. We also need to educate leaders within this movement about OER, because there need to be time, there need to be energy, there need to be recognition, etc., etc. So that's why I really will argue for that. We need to see the ecosystem, and we also need to see the different kind of levels, the macro level, maybe at the international level, European level, country level, as you mentioned, from Norway, because you really have these recommendations even from the government. And there again, I think that the OER recommendations can help at macro level. If each of the countries are developing the objectives which are now addressed about the infrastructure, etc., but also the meso level, maybe at the institution, the school, whatever it is, and the micro level in the course as such. And here I think we can take support and help from our students. But not at least the nano level is important to look at, and that is about you and me, because each of us can make a difference, and it is about us.
But could you explain a bit how the UNESCO recommendations can really be brought into organizations? So if I show our president the UNESCO recommendations, he's going to tell me that's not for me, UNESCO, you know, that's for maybe not for us. We're just a small higher education.
Yes, maybe they are saying that, but we shall not stick with that, because we have to argue why it is important and why it matters. And for me, I think at least each time, for example, I work a lot as a consultant, and when universities are dealing with their strategies, for example, and we need to build in the recommendations in each strategy at each kind of level. That is one way you can do it.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, I'm not saying it's an easy task, but I'm saying that we have to work for it, and we have to put time and energy, and it's also a question about value propositions, because if we put value in this area, there will also be money for it, and there will be time. So we need to keep going.
Okay.
I think that is the only way. So,
You had a remark as well.
Yes, I think that we should make the point that at least when the state finances the production of learning resources, they should sort of demand that this is on an open license. We can start there, because that would actually be a very good start. And that I think makes a good point. If it's paid for by the state, you should not be copyright on the content produced. Other than that, I just wanted to mention that I'm talking about the teachers that we bring into production, and of course you just can't go without any quality control. So we have a desk, and we have a control, publishing control for everything we do, but teachers are amazingly good at producing content. They're very skilled. That's our experience after doing this for 10, 11 years.
As you mentioned finances, and I'm just looking at the time, so maybe we can have one final round of discussion on what do you think are the really working business models, and what are actually sustainable models for OER?
Well, in many ways, I guess we are lucky, because we have a government who actually makes this possible for us. So.
Sustainability is also about having a constant quality check, and to see how things are being used, and to revise content, you know, all that, the wonderful world of Creative Commons, where you sort of can prune things, and you can garden things, and you can, yeah. So that's also a part of the sustainability, because if you just produce it as a text and leave it there, it will be too old to use in 4 or 5 years. You have to have a process of checking out content, revising it, updating it, and that I think we've done rather successfully with NDLA, and we have the content out there, but as an organization, we have a lot of competence and a lot of experience from doing this. And if you're thinking about setting up something, then don't hesitate to contact us to hear with us about our experiences.
Ebba?
For financing and economical issue, I think it's again about the value propositions, because if where you put values, there will also go the money, as I said before. If you really are working in this area with openness and take it very seriously, there will come money. So that's why we have to keep going, all of us who are believers in OER and open education, and in every step we take, we have to, you know, promote it and emphasize it, because time is right just now.
Markus,
maybe
your
as
experience?
the last comment here is maybe I direct idea for a business model, but if you maybe look at Osterwalder's business model canvas, and I fully in line with Ebba what is saying, we have the value proposition in the center, then we have of course the cost and benefits, and maybe working with these 9 cells sometimes help us really to identify the focus, and then maybe even say this is a customer, this is the value we are going to develop. So this is also part for us, and even if maybe one of our main drivers of an international business school is executive education, of course we can maybe make a point here and differentiate, even providing some of these resources, and maybe even, yes, as a cross-marketing budget, even thinking here really to push the things at some point.
By the way, are there still questions from the audience? So now you have the opportunity to ask any of the panelists whatever you would like to.
My Christmas wish list.
Well, then one last question.
Answered all the questions then.
Then one last question from my side. What do you think? What will the status of OER be in 5 years from now? What are the next trends and waves we should consider, and what is going to happen next? Ebba, maybe you start with the prediction and.
Yeah, again, I think that OER is just one part of the whole openness movement. And there are so many other things also to need to be around, and I think that is really the way forward. OER is important, but I think really the future, and I will not say 5 years, I hope it will happen earlier on, it is the culture of openness and the use of OERs. Yeah.
Thank you. Markus?
Well, wait,
Yes.
maybe one thing.
Yeah. Yes, Ebba.
I mean, and to summarize what I said is that it should be OER openness by default, just by exception, maybe some closeness.
So maybe in regards to the title of the session, maybe it's more and more moving from commitment to action, so that we are all, as advocates, manage to engage more people in maybe even outside Norway to work with open educational resources. So maybe talking in numbers, I think it's very difficult, maybe not being too bold, but of course maybe at least there are maybe more and more people interested and really working and experiencing the process we were describing.
Also, like with the internet, we agreed upon protocols and standards from sort of day one, and it became, of course, a global success. So nobody today would sort of start their own internet. It's, I think, the same thing. I think open education resources and production tools and everything will gravitate towards standards. And then it will be apparent to everyone that this is a lot more efficient. You produce content with a lot more quality if you consider the ecosystem. Also, hopefully, we can. This is a dream, you know, that if we can produce a production system and a publishing system that also countries with poorer countries can just use, and then they can start actually producing content from day one. So they don't have to, like we've been spending like 60 million euros on this system for 11 years, and it's open source. So why can't someone else take that and rather produce the content from day one in their own country? That would be sort of a dream come true.
I agree with you, Markus. I mean, I would love other countries to do the same, because then we could, you know, we've sort of been, you know, the pioneers and been the first ones doing this, and we would love to work together with others and learn from others, cooperate, find out how we can improve as well. And that would help us, you know, if others were doing the same thing. So that's a wish. That's my Christmas wish.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay, so thank you very much for sharing all your experiences. I think we have learned quite a lot, and we have learned the tools are out there, the content is out there, there's a lot of commitment, and now we just got to do it. So that's my Christmas wish as well. Go out and do it, and let's continue to work on OER. Maybe next year we see a lot more well, a lot less barriers, as Ebba said, and more potentials for OER. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to the panelists, and I hope you have a very tasty lunch now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.